The moment I saw the unfamiliar pickup truck parked outside my quiet forest cabin, I knew something was wrong. But I never imagined it would lead to handcuffs, hidden secrets, and the FBI knocking on my door. The tires of my old Ford Ranger crunched softly over the gravel road, winding through tall pines that had stood there long before I was born. The trees swayed gently under the late afternoon sun, casting long shadows over the path. It was the kind of peaceful quiet you only get deep in the woods. No traffic, no sirens, no neighbors peeking through curtains. Just me, nature, and the cabin I built with my own 2 hands. Well, almost built. I'd bought the land outright 8 years ago and paid a local crew to help frame the structure. After that, I spent 2 full summers finishing the place. Every nail, every plank, every window was part of my escape from the noisy world. It wasn't much a single bedroom, small kitchen, wood stove in the center, but it was mine, a place I could go whenever city life started squeezing too tight. And lately it had been squeezing hard, so here I was, heading up for my annual spring retreat, looking forward to 4 full weeks of fishing, reading, chopping wood, and forgetting about everything and everyone except something was wrong. I felt it before I even saw it. It was the smell, first burnt pine, smoke on the air. That wasn't unusual, sure, but it was fresh, too fresh. Then came the sight, a gray Chevy Silverado parked haphazardly across my cabin's front yard, tires half sunk in the muddy soil. I hit the brakes. My eyes narrowed. I hadn't invited anyone. Nobody but my lawyer even knew I was coming here, and I definitely didn't give anyone permission to park on my land, much less stay in my cabin. I stepped out of the truck slowly, heart beating just a little faster than normal. The smoke was coming from the chimney, and that made my stomach twist. Someone was inside. I walked up the front steps cautiously. That's when I saw him, barefoot, young, probably in his 20s, with shaggy hair and a smirk that instantly rubbed me the wrong way. He was sitting in my wooden rocking chair, sipping from a beer bottle, his muddy boots kicked off to the side like he lived here. "Excuse me," I said. "Can I help you?" He didn't even flinch, just looked up, squinted at the sun behind me and grinned. "Oh, hey, you must be the neighbor or something." "No worries, man. I'm all good. My mom gave me this cabin, said I could crash here long as I want." I stared at him, thinking he had to be joking. I didn't even know this kid, let alone his mom. My voice came out sharper than I meant it to. "What did you just say? Your mom gave you this cabin?" He shrugged and took another sip of his beer. "Yeah, Karen Stokes. She's the HOA president back in town. Said the guy who used to own this place disappeared or whatever. Said it was up for grabs now. New boundary lines or something." Karen Stokes. I clenched my fists. I knew that name all too well. I'd dealt with her 3 times before, once when she tried to fine me for leaving a canoe on my own dock, once when she claimed my fence was 2 feet too tall, and once when she left a note asking me to voluntarily donate to the Neighborhood Beautification Fund, which I promptly ignored. She was the kind of person who printed her own rules and acted like they were law. "I'm the guy who owns this place," I said slowly. "This cabin belongs to me. It's my property, purchased legally and filed with the county. I've got the title, I've got the paperwork, and you need to get off my land." He just laughed. "Then take it up with my mom. I'm not going anywhere. Cabin's mine now." I felt heat rush up my neck. This wasn't just some misunderstanding. This kid truly believed he had the right to be here, and worse, he thought I didn't. I turned and walked back to my truck, trying not to lose my temper. I wasn't going to argue with some brat on my porch. I needed to go into town, find Karen, and settle this face to face. The drive back took about 40 minutes. The sun dipped lower behind the mountains as I pulled into the HOA office building, small gray structure attached to the side of a hardware store. I marched in with dirt still on my boots and fire in my voice. Karen was there, of course, behind her desk, wearing a pearl necklace and sipping from a white ceramic mug that said "Number 1 President." She looked up like she'd just been expecting me. "Ah," she said, setting her mug down gently. "Mr. Dempsey, I figured you'd be stopping by." "You gave my cabin to someone," I said flatly. "A kid. Said he was your son." Her smile didn't even flinch. "I didn't give him your cabin," she replied. "I gave him a property that's within our newly adjusted HOA boundary map. The cabin appeared to be abandoned. There's been no record of you staying there in over a year. We assumed it had reverted back to the association." "You can't revert private property," I snapped. "I own that land outright. It's not under your jurisdiction." She tilted her head, like I was the one who didn't understand the updated map was approved by the board. "If you have an issue with it, you're welcome to submit a formal dispute. In the meantime, my son has legal occupancy rights as determined by the interim use clause we adopted last quarter." My blood boiled. I didn't agree to any of this. "And you can't rewrite property law just because it suits you. You've overstepped, Karen, big time." She leaned back and crossed her arms. "I suggest you calm down, Mr. Dempsey. We don't tolerate threats here." I almost laughed. She was playing victim now. I shook my head, turned and walked out without another word. By the time I made it back to the motel, the sun had set completely. I sat on the edge of the bed, hands still shaking. This wasn't just someone squatting on land they thought they had a legal right to it. And if Karen had messed with the records somehow, or worse, forged anything, this could get ugly. I decided right then, I'd call my lawyer in the morning, drive to the county office, and bring every piece of paperwork I had. I wasn't going to let this slide. I wasn't about to lose the only place that ever felt like home because some power-hungry HOA president wanted to play games. But I couldn't know that something even bigger was at play. That night, I barely slept. I kept hearing that kid's voice in my head, replaying his words. My mum gave me this cabin, over and over. It sounded so casual, like it was no big deal to him, but to me it was everything. The air felt thick, heavy with something I couldn't name. A storm was brewing, and I was just standing at the edge, not yet realizing how deep the trouble went. Morning light filtered through the cheap motel blinds, casting long, dusty rays over the side table cluttered with coffee cups and crumpled receipts. I hadn't slept much. My mind had been running in circles all night, trying to figure out how Karen Stokes managed to insert herself so deep into my business. I kept coming back to the same question. How could someone take a legally owned property and just reassign it? I got dressed, gathered every document I had brought with me in a battered file folder, and headed to the county recorder's office. The line at the front desk was short, just a couple of people paying taxes and asking about permits. When I got to the front, I asked for a certified property status check for parcel number 488C, the exact coordinates of my cabin. The clerk, a young woman with tired eyes, typed the number into her computer. Her brows lifted slightly. Huh? She muttered. I leaned in. What? Well, it's a little odd. This parcel was marked as a private holding for years, under your name, but recently, like 2 months ago, it was flagged in the system. There's a red tag on the file. DOJ notice, Department of Justice. She nodded. Yeah, it just says hold federal interest. Do not alter or transfer. It's weird. We don't usually see that on private cabins. You say this is your land. It is, I said firmly, unfolding my papers. I have the purchase contract, title registration, tax records, and everything in between. That cabin's mine. And some HOA president back in town claims she now controls it. The clerk's eyes widened. If that's true, and this land has a federal hold, that's serious. You might want to talk to someone higher up. I'll get the supervisor. While she stepped away, I opened the manila folder again. I'd brought everything I could find, scanned emails with a real estate agent, stamped permits, old Polaroids of me hammering beams with my cousin, even a faded bill of sale from the original land purchase. I wasn't letting this go. The supervisor, an older man named Greg, came over and scanned the file. He frowned and ran his fingers through his white mustache. Sir, he said, this property isn't under local dispute anymore. That DOJ flag means someone in federal law enforcement marked it. Could be for any number of reasons: criminal case, witness protection, asset tracking, you name it. It's rare, but it happens. But no one told me, I said, confused. Why would my cabin be marked by the Department of Justice? I've never done anything shady. I pay my taxes. I keep to myself. Greg looked at the screen, then back at me. I don't know the reason. It might not even be about you. Sometimes, it's about what happened around the property. He leaned closer. Whatever's going on, you need to be careful. If someone illegally accessed or used this cabin, and now it's tied up in a federal matter, you'll want to get a lawyer involved fast. By noon, I was back at my motel room, phone to my ear. My lawyer, Amanda Harris, picked up after the third ring. I explained everything: her and her son, the new boundary lines, and the DOJ flag. She didn't say much at first, just let me talk. Then she replied, calm and sharp as always. Okay. First thing, that DOJ tag means we need to back off any direct confrontation. Don't go near the cabin again, not yet. Second, I'm going to reach out to a contact in the federal circuit. If this is what I think it is, someone made a very serious mistake. But Karen said she gave it away. Amanda sighed. Then Karen just handed her son a federally protected asset. That's not just illegal, it's potentially criminal. The gravity of it all sank in deeper. I hung up and stared at the motel ceiling. Everything had gone from annoying to bizarre in less than 24 hours. And if Amanda was right, I was just a bystander caught in a much bigger story. Still, curiosity got the better of me. That evening I drove close enough to the cabin to park behind a thicket of trees but not go near the porch. I brought binoculars, something I usually used for spotting deer in the fall. The kid was still there. He had dragged a second chair onto the porch, blasting music from a speaker while roasting marshmallows over a fire pit he'd built right on the edge of my garden plot. I watched, fuming silently, but then something strange happened. He walked around to the back of the cabin, kicking at something in the dirt. After a moment, he lifted a small black box from beneath a loose floorboard. He opened it, pulled something out, maybe a phone or a driven, walked back inside. I took a breath and backed away from the view, heart pounding. What was he doing? And why had he gone straight for that floorboard like he knew something was there? That board was loose because I had always meant to fix it. I never told anyone about it, not even my cousin. But this kid didn't just stumble on it. He went straight to it. Something didn't add up. I returned to town that night, parked near a diner, and sat in my truck with the windows cracked open. The wind smelled of pine and something else, something sharp, like gun oil or old smoke. A thought crept in that I didn't want to say out loud. What if someone was using my cabin for something I didn't know about? When Amanda called me back the next morning, her voice was urgent. I spoke to a federal contact. Your cabin was under passive surveillance. They'd flagged it because there was evidence someone had used the property, possibly without your knowledge, as a drop point. Documents, devices, encrypted tech. They didn't want to spook anyone, so they didn't seize it outright. And now Karen's kid is sitting in the middle of it. I asked. Yes, Amanda replied. And that could complicate things fast. I swallowed hard. So what do we do? Nothing direct, she said. This has escalated past you. Now my contact is passing the information to the agency in charge. They'll handle it from here. But I need you to stay away from that cabin. For now, you're a civilian witness. Don't interfere. I nodded slowly, even though she couldn't see me. It was all happening so fast. That afternoon, I went to a small bar on the edge of town to clear my head. While sipping a beer, I overheard two local guys talking about some hotshot from the HOA bragging about fixing land issues around the lake. She said she was finally putting abandoned properties to good use. One of them said with a chuckle, "Gave her kid a cabin out by the ridge." "Lucky kid," the other replied. "Wonder what it's like to just get handed a place like that." I walked out without finishing my drink. The next day, the unmarked SUV rolled into town. Black windows, government plates. I saw it parked outside Karen Stokes' office around noon. Two men in suits walked in. They stayed inside for 20 minutes. When they left, Karen wasn't with them. That night, I drove by the HOA building. It was locked. The lights were off. No sign of Karen. The next morning, her son's truck was gone from the cabin, just gone. No sign of a struggle. No sign of activity. Just empty rocking chairs on the porch and a cold gray chimney. Something had shifted, and I realized then this wasn't my fight anymore. It was now a matter for people with badges, files, and a whole lot more power than an HOA president. But part of me still wanted answers. I wanted to know what had really been hidden beneath my cabin all this time, and why someone had marked me in my quiet piece of forest as part of something I never signed up for. The silence around the cabin was almost louder than any noise. 3 days had passed since Karen's son had vanished from the property, and word had started to spread through the small town. Nobody had seen Karen since the men in suits had entered the HOA office, and the building remained locked. No signs taped to the door, no emails, no HOA meetings, just a creeping, uneasy quiet for a woman who used to send out newsletters every week about community behavior expectations. Her sudden disappearance spoke volumes. I tried to focus on staying out of it, just like Amanda told me. I kept my head down, avoided talking too much at the diner or baiting the few neighbors who knew I was back in town. But everywhere I went, I could feel the stares. Not hostile, more like curious. Like people wanted to ask what I knew but were too nervous to bring it up. Even Deputy Mallory, who I had known since high school, stopped me outside the general store and asked with a raised brow, "Hey, heard your cabin's been getting some attention." "Yeah," I said, keeping my tone neutral, trying to let the lawyers handle it. She nodded slowly, clearly wanting to say more, but didn't. That evening I got a call from Amanda again. I was halfway through a greasy burger, in my motel room, barely paying attention to the TV. "The FBI has officially taken over the investigation," she said without greeting. "And Karen Stokes is now listed as a federal person of interest." I blinked. "Wait, the FBI?" I thought this was a DOJ hold. "They've been coordinating," Amanda replied. "Turns out there was a lot more going on at your cabin than anyone realized. Federal agents have already swept the property undercover. They were trying to trace a communications signal routed through a satellite relay. But someone accessed the device recently, which triggered a breach alert. That person, obviously, was Karen's son." I leaned forward. "So what exactly was being stored in my cabin?" She paused. "They didn't tell me everything, but what they did say was enough. Apparently someone had installed a hidden, secure router and relay unit under your floorboards, probably during the time you were away for the winter last year. That unit was being used to bounce encrypted data packets between multiple anonymous locations. It was part of a dark web relay system. They think it was being used to launder digital currency and move illegal files without detection." My mouth went dry. "Are you saying my cabin was part of a cybercrime ring?" "No," Amanda said calmly. "Not you. Your cabin. You were just the unlucky guy who owned the right patch of land. But once Karen's son activated the hidden device, unintentionally or not, it blew the lid off the surveillance. Now the feds are tying the activity to a wider network. This could lead to multiple arrests." I exhaled slowly. "And Karen?" "She's been brought in for questioning," Amanda said. "From what I hear, she's not doing well under pressure. Turns out, she might have known more than she let on. Her boundary change excuse was a cover. She'd been warned before by a certified mail not to interfere with the property due to ongoing monitoring, but she ignored it." My eyes narrowed. "Wait, she knew. She had official notice." "Yes, but she didn't tell the board. Didn't log it in any meeting minutes." She kept it quiet, probably thought it was some bureaucratic scare tactic, and then she tried to take over the property anyway. That made my blood boil. It wasn't just that she'd overstepped, she'd deliberately ignored legal warnings, and she had the nerve to lecture me about rules and boundaries. "What's next?" I asked. Amanda's voice dropped a bit. "You might be called in as a witness. Just a statement. For now. But if things move toward a trial, you'll be key in showing ownership and intent. The fact that you never authorized anyone to access the cabin helps your case immensely." I nodded, not even realizing how tightly I was gripping the phone. "Stay out of the cabin until they give you the green light," she finished. "And if anyone tries to approach you, media investigators, even townspeople, redirect them to me. You need to stay clean in this." After we hung up, I sat for a long while, staring at my reflection in the motel mirror. I looked tired, older than I remembered. Maybe it was the stress, maybe it was the weight of knowing my quiet escape had been turned into a digital crime scene. The next morning, the black SUV returned, this time followed by 2 more vehicles. I didn't try to follow, but I did take a drive by the cabin hours later, keeping a healthy distance. The porch was cleared. No chairs, no beer bottles, no noise, but something else was new. A small metal sign staked into the dirt at the edge of the yard. "Property under federal investigation. Do not enter." I parked far enough away to avoid notice and walked along the tree line until I reached a familiar old logging trail. From there, I could see the back side of the cabin just barely through the trees, and that's when I saw the door swing open. Not a federal agent, not Karen, a woman I didn't recognize, dressed in jeans and a brown jacket, stepped out onto the porch with a clipboard. She adjusted her sunglasses and spoke into a walkie, then disappeared back inside. Later, Amanda confirmed she was from the cybercrime division. "You're not the only victim here," she said. "They think whoever planted the equipment may have used similar locations across the country. Cabins, old ranger stations, unused barns, all off-grid. Your place was just one node in a bigger system." I didn't know whether to feel violated or just unlucky. A few days passed, and then the news broke. A regional news station aired a short segment about a rural property tied to a federal digital surveillance bust. They didn't name names, but everyone in town knew which cabin it was. I got a few looks at the gas station. One guy nodded at me and said, "Heard your place was on the 6 o'clock. I just smiled and kept walking. But Karen, she didn't show her face, not at the hardware store, not at the market, not even at Sunday service where she used to sit in the front row with her pastel scarves and firm nods. Word was, she was under cooperative federal supervision, whatever that meant, and her son last seen getting on a bus with 2 plainclothes agents, destination unknown. I couldn't help but wonder, did he ever even know what he had stepped into, or was he just a pawn in a much larger game his mother didn't understand? That Friday, Amanda called one more time. "They're preparing to release the property," she said. "Not yet, but soon. You'll get full access back plus a security briefing. They want to make sure you know how to spot signs of tampering. In the future, am I safe to go back?" I asked. There was a pause. "Yes," she said. "But the question is, do you want to?" I didn't answer right away. That night I drove past the cabin once more, just for a minute. I parked at the same old spot near the ridge and looked down at the tin roof peeking through the trees. So quiet, so still, the way it used to be, but now, I couldn't unsee what had happened there. I couldn't unfeel it either. The invasion, the lies, the way someone else had taken something peaceful and turned it into a tool for something dark. I wanted my home back, but more than that, I wanted peace. Maybe someday I'd find it again. Maybe. By the second week of April, the spring sun had warmed the mountain pines, but nothing felt normal. The birds still chirped in the morning. Rain still tapped the tin roof of the motel during gray afternoons, but beneath all that, something had changed in town. People spoke more softly when I entered the diner. Conversations paused just long enough to be obvious. It wasn't hostility, they weren't blaming me. It was caution, that strange blend of curiosity and fear, like I might be tied to something far bigger than they could understand. And honestly, I didn't blame them. I hadn't returned to the cabin. The FBI still had agents rotating in and out every couple of days. They'd removed the satellite router and hidden relay gear equipment I hadn't even known existed beneath my floorboards. Now the porch stood bare, the rocking chairs gone, the flower boxes empty and dirt-streaked. Amanda told me over the phone that they'd likely finish their investigation within a week or 2. After that, the land would be formally cleared and returned to me, along with a signed affidavit from the Bureau acknowledging my full, uncontested ownership. In normal circumstances, I should have felt relief, but the truth was, I didn't know what to feel anymore. This cabin, my retreat from the world, had been invaded not just by Karen's son, but by something darker, hidden in plain sight. I'd never expected federal agents to walk through my property, lifting floorboards and tracing encrypted data from some international ring. And yet, here I was. What broke the tension wasn't the FBI, it was Karen. She cracked it started quietly. A neighbor, old Mr. Benford, who owned a cabin down by Mill Creek, told me he saw Karen leaving the sheriff's office 2 towns over, cuffs, but surrounded by 2 plainclothes agents. She looked pale, he said, sweaty, like someone who hadn't slept in days. That alone wasn't surprising. Her arrest had been quiet, but not secret. But what happened next sent shockwaves through the community. A local news station somehow got a leaked copy of Karen's interview with federal agents. It aired late on a Thursday night during a special report segment, just 15 minutes long, but enough to send 1,000 jaws dropping across the county. The audio played over a still image of Karen sitting in the interrogation room, wearing a peach-colored sweater and no makeup. Her voice cracked at first. She claimed innocence. "I thought the cabin was abandoned. I didn't know." But then came the turn. "I received a letter in January from a post office box in Richmond. It said not to disturb the cabin, that it was part of a government matter. I thought it was a scam at first, but then someone showed up. A man said he worked for a consulting firm tied to the HOA's mapping project, gave me a check, $5,000, said if I kept quiet and let him adjust our boundaries to include the parcel, I could do what I wanted with it." The interviewer pressed her. "Did you know who he worked for?" "No," Karen admitted, "but I knew it wasn't right. I didn't ask questions. I wanted my son to have a place. He'd been struggling. I thought I was helping him." "And you didn't tell the board about the payment?" Karen's voice turned into a whisper. "No, the video cut off there, but it was enough. Enough for every resident with a porch and an opinion to start talking." She wasn't just nosy and power-hungry. She was bribed. The news traveled fast. Within 24 hours, Karen was officially removed from her position as HOA president. The board released a statement distancing themselves from her actions and insisting they had no knowledge of the altered boundary filings. A special election was called. Residents were livid. By Saturday morning, there were protest signs staked in front of the HOA office. "Our community, not a cover-up," one read. Another just said, "Karen lied. I stayed out of it. I didn't march. I didn't speak to reporters, but I was paying attention." Amanda called again the following Monday. "She's cooperating," she said flatly. "Karen's giving up the name of the man who approached her. We don't know yet if he's actually tied to the cybercrime ring or just another link in the chain, but it's opening doors." I sat on the motel bed, staring at the floor. "So she really sold me out for $5,000. Amanda sighed. "That's what it looks like." I didn't say anything for a long time. Then I asked, "What happens to her now?" "Well," she said, "she might avoid jail time if she cooperates fully, but her reputation, it's gone. Nobody's going to trust her with anything ever again. And as for the HOA, expect changes. A lot of them." I went quiet again. She added, "The cabin will be released back to you within the week. Full clearance. The agents are nearly done documenting and photographing the equipment site. Once you sign the acknowledgement, it's yours again. No strings." But the strings to me were still their mental, emotional, spiritual. That cabin had been violated. Not just structurally, but symbolically. My peace had been turned into a staging ground for things I couldn't even pronounce. And now, Karen's $5,000 mistake had exposed a chain that went far beyond HOA drama. That same afternoon, I decided to do something I hadn't done in weeks. I drove back to the cabin carefully, slowly, and parked just beyond the tree line. The air smelled of rain and moss, the soil still damp from the storm the night before. I stepped out, boots crunching gently on gravel and pine needles. The sign from the FBI was still staked into the ground, but now it was laminated and marked "Site Cleared." I walked up to the porch slowly. The boards creaked beneath my feet, familiar but strange. Inside, it looked almost untouched, except it wasn't. A section of the floor had been cut out and resealed. The area beneath the window had new nails. They'd removed the relay gear surgically, like surgeons taking out a tumor. Everything else, the stove, the sink, the books on the shelf, remained as I had left it. But the feeling was different, like someone had been whispering secrets inside these walls while I was away. I walked through the cabin slowly, touching the banister, the windowsill, the old wood stove that still smelled faintly of ash. My sanctuary had been turned into a battlefield, and now it was just quiet again. Then I saw it. A small, folded note tucked under my old fishing hat on the counter. I picked it up and unfolded it carefully. It read, "We don't always choose the storms that pass through our homes, but we do choose how we rebuild them. Agent L. Masters." I didn't know who Agent Masters was. I didn't remember meeting him, but the message landed hard. I stood there for a long time, just breathing. No Karen, no wires, no secrets, just me that night. I lit a fire in the wood stove and slept on the couch inside the cabin for the first time in months. It creaked the same way it used to. The wind whispered through the cracks, but now it sounded more like a song than a warning. And somewhere, miles away, Karen was probably sitting in a silent room of her own, realizing that no amount of control or HOA titles could ever undo what she'd done. This wasn't just about land, it was about trust, and she'd lost it. The air was warmer now. Early May in the mountains meant the trees had begun to shake off winter's grip, and little bursts of green returned to the forest around the cabin. Tiny buds dotted the branches, and the stream behind the hill was flowing with fresh snowmelt. Nature, it seemed, didn't care what had happened here over the past few months. It just kept moving, healing in its own quiet way. I'd spent the last 5 days at the cabin alone mostly. Amanda had delivered the final clearance document by email, the FBI's formal release, the federal hold lifted, and an affidavit confirming I had no legal or criminal connection to the investigation. The last official trace of the chaos was gone, just like the agents, the wires, and the noise. Still, I wasn't sure I belonged here anymore. The cabin looked the same, but something in me had shifted. You don't come back from something like that unchanged. I'd always thought this place was impenetrable, my fortress of solitude, but it had been vulnerable all along. The world had found its way in. Not through the front door, but under the floorboards. And yet, despite all of it, I'd come back. The first few nights were strange. Every creak in the wood made my pulse rise. Every flicker of light felt like a signal. But by the third day, something in me finally let go. I started chopping wood again. Brewed coffee on the stove instead of the motel drip machine. Even took the canoe out on the lake. The silence no longer made me anxious, it grounded me. That's when the knock came. It was just after noon. I had been sanding a new window frame out back when I heard footsteps on the porch, careful, slow. I grabbed a towel to wipe off the dust and stepped around the corner, and there she was, Karen Stokes, dressed in a plain gray jacket, khaki slacks, and no makeup. Her posture wasn't the same sharp, upright stance I remembered. She looked smaller, somehow weaker. Her hands were clasped tightly in front of her, and her face wore a mix of guilt and dread. "I know I shouldn't be here," she said before I could open my mouth, "but I needed to see you. I wanted to say something." In person, I didn't answer right away. Just looked at her, wondering if this was another trick, another act. But she didn't move. She didn't flinch. "I came alone," she added, "and I'm not here to argue, I swear." I crossed my arms. "You've got 2 minutes." She nodded quickly. "Thank you." Karen stepped onto the porch carefully, like it might collapse under her weight. She glanced around at the railing, the doorframe, the stacked firewood, as if seeing it all for the first time. "I've been to a lot of places lately," she began. "Rooms with lawyers, rooms with agents, rooms with cameras and microphones. But this is the place I've thought about the most, because it's where I made the biggest mistake." I didn't interrupt. I let her speak. "I thought I could control everything," she admitted. "The neighborhood, the rules, even the people. I thought I was doing it for the community, but deep down, I just wanted to matter. I wanted to feel like someone was listening to me." She paused, looking down at her shoes. "And then that man came along. He made it sound so harmless. Just a map change, a small bribe. Really, $5,000 and the promise of no questions asked. I convinced myself it was just a way to help my son. I didn't even think about you, what this place meant to you." I watched her closely, still silent. "I knew I'd get caught eventually," she said, "but I didn't expect to feel this. Ashamed I ruined your peace. I nearly got my son arrested, and I dragged an entire town into something that had nothing to do with them." She finally looked up at me. "I'm sorry, Mr. Dempsey. I know that doesn't fix anything, but I needed to say it out loud. I needed you to hear it." The porch fell into stillness. The wind rustled the pine trees above us, and for a few seconds, all I could hear was the chirp of a woodpecker in the distance. Didn't know her anything. I could have told her to leave, to never show her face again. But somehow, I didn't. I saw something in her face I hadn't seen before, real regret. So I nodded once. "I accept your apology," I said quietly, "but don't expect me to forget." She nodded slowly. "I understand." With that, she turned and walked down the steps. No drama, no demands. Just a woman finally facing what she'd done. And I realized something. Sometimes the closure we need doesn't come from courts or signatures. It comes from facing the people who wronged us and watching them carry their own shame. That evening, I built a fire out back and sat in my old wooden chair with a blanket draped over my shoulders. The stars blinked quietly above the treetops. I listened to the forest breathe, and I thought about everything this cabin had endured. It had been invaded, violated, compromised. But it was still standing. So was I. I didn't know what the future held. Maybe I'd stay here for a few more weeks. Maybe I'd move on and sell the place. Or maybe, just maybe, I'd start fresh, right here, plant a new garden, replace the porch chairs, and rebuild from the ashes. What I did know was this: the worst was behind me. Karen was gone. The cabin was mine again, and the peace I'd lost was slowly finding its way back. Before heading inside that night, I pulled a nail from the old post on the porch and hammered a small wooden sign into place. It read, "Private property, no HOA jurisdiction. Established 2015, reclaimed 2025. I smiled to myself and stepped inside. The cabin creaked softly as I closed the door. Home at last. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and drop your thoughts in the comments. Subscribe to Bright Reality for more jaw-dropping true stories and unbelievable twists.